that you're hurting that. Now, as far as block scheduling goes, I have found in industry in particular, and with young children, when our kids were young, that 80 minutes is an awfully long time to hold their attention. What you need to do, if you're going to have that kind of a block, is have it broken up in such a way that you can change things, that you keep their attention, and yet progressively advance them through the course.
Copy.
Randy, I'd have to agree with you. My two main thoughts, even before you spoke, were that the 80 minutes is an awful long period of time to try to keep the attention of a student. Even in the adult learning model, everybody knows attention span is about 20 minutes. In the business world, if you have a meeting longer than about 20 minutes, you've lost people. And the other point that you hit on is the gaps in having certain subjects. And when we talk about the PSSA tests, and if the PSSAs are given generally in March, and if a student has math in the fall semester and doesn't have any math after Christmas, you know, they're 3 months without any math, and then they're in the middle of a math test. So I think there's probably pros and cons to it. I'm leaning towards the cons side, but I'm still researching.
I went and spoke with Mr. Blanchard about this, and he's the one that gave you the book, and I read the book. And what they say in the book is that you have a block of time, 80 or 90 minutes, and you're supposed to entertain about 20 minutes or so for instruction and about 30 or 40 minutes in application. We used to call that homework. Okay? And then close up the block with some sort of larger picture kind of application to it, synthesis level. And so I asked them about students gaming the system. The high school right now requires 3 math courses before you graduate, 4 science courses, or vice versa, 3 and 4, 4 and 3. And so you can literally take a math course in your first 2 years, first 2 semesters, and in your 10th, and not have math for a year and almost a half before you take your PSSAs. And let's say you do well in your PSSAs, you can actually get to college and not have math for 2.5 years. So exactly how are you going to do on basic math? I am still researching, but I have some serious questions about the block system the way it currently is. And this application process where you have most of your class time in application, we used to call that homework, that bothers me too. So, and I know the school district's looking at this because it came up at the last board meeting, so I hope they look at it seriously. Thank you.
I hate the block. I think it's a terrible idea and it doesn't work. It's a disaster for math. Half of the kids who are taking the SAT are taking it cold. That's one of the reasons they don't do as well as they should. Half of the kids who are taking the PSSAs are taking them cold also. Math is one of those subjects that you need to do every day. It's a building skill. The same goes for writing. Our kids should be having English every day. It's even more of a disaster for languages. You cannot learn to speak a foreign language 3 months out of the year and not do it again for 8, 9 months until you get to the next semester. The teachers end up spending half of the semester reteaching what has been forgotten in the semester that they didn't have the class. So it wastes time.
I too am not an advocate for block scheduling. I disagree with it. I don't believe that the benefits outweigh the sacrifices. Consistency is key in education, and I don't believe the block schedule always offers that. That being said, while I would love to wave a magic wand and say, let's put Gettysburg High School back to an 8 or 9 period day, that obviously will not happen next fall. Yes, that has been brought up at the last board meeting, and that is something that we will be looking into in the future. I honestly was not on the board, and I was a very young adult when the block scheduling was implemented. I don't know why it was. I would be an advocate to go back to an 8 or 9 period day. Will that happen next fall? No. And why? Because it would involve, as when we went from an 8 period day to block scheduling, revamping our entire curriculum. I would be supportive in looking into that. I would be supported in going back to that.
Next year is a negotiating year with the Gettysburg Area Education Association. And knowing that our index will be below 1%, do you have any strategies or thoughts on how you would progress on that?
We have dug ourselves a pretty good sized hole over the past few years with pay and benefits to employees. Over the past few years, when the cost of living was zero, inflation is zero, everyone's been getting a 3.5% pay raise. And so now they're making, and although everyone refers to it as a COLA, it's not a COLA, it's a pay raise. And so now their pay has gone up about 11.5% in the last 3 years. And their benefits have gone up considerably as well. And now we get to a point where we're constrained because of outside revenues, and we lack this plan that we talked about earlier. We're supposed to have a 3-year plan, and we don't have one. And we're also seem to not understand the difference between needs and wants. When we build a budget, we base our requirements on needs, not wants. Just because you have a dollar doesn't mean you have to spend it. And so I'd like to talk to the rest of the board members, if I get elected, about putting more money away and defining the difference between a need and a want, and prioritizing our needs just like families do, and make sure that we address expenditures that way. Now, as for the immediate future, I'm going to suggest it would be entirely appropriate for a pay freeze for everybody. Administrators, I talked to some teachers. Well, he got $500,000 and they got 2%, so we should get 2%. You see how that goes? It just keeps going and going and going. When the cost of living, the inflation index is 0. So we need to get a hold of this. Everyone needs to contribute to this challenge. Thank you.
I'd like to start by saying that I was very disappointed at the 2% pay raise, and that our local union did not agree to a temporary wage freeze. I think that was the wrong decision for a couple of reasons. The biggest one is that salaries will come back. In 2 or 3 years, when the economy rebounds, salaries will rebound to where they were before. Increases will become more steady. But the programs that we have to cut for the children to make up for the money now are not coming back. So I'd like to see us focus on making cuts to those things that we are not going to lose permanently. So for that, I would start looking at a slightly lower increase. I think that will really depend on where we end up at the end of this year financially. The other thing that I would really like to see, and will very strongly advocate for on the school board, is the introduction of merit pay. I think that increases need to be tied to performance. That doesn't mean that teachers should be paid on the basis of student test scores. I'm not sure that those are the best way to measure performance, but we need to have specific goals for improvement. I would love to see a way to reward teachers for thinking beyond this year's test, for showing real innovation.